how are we going to be focused? What little things are we going to do in training to make sure that we're focused? How are we going to how are we going to help each other be focused? You can go from granular detail through to broader definitions of focus. Strong. Well, strong to an individual can be strong in the air, strong in a challenge, through to mentally strong, through to being strong coming back from injury, being strong with determination in the gym. I think these action words, these adjectives are wonderful ways to break down the kind of granular behaviors that we all want to engage in. And we can have just 3 and build from there. And I think we can start to have great conversations in pods, in pairs, peer-to-peer learning, coaches with players, coaches with the support staff, just around 3 words. I think that's a powerful place to be.
Well, welcome to the podcast, Dan. An absolute privilege to have you on. We've been, I guess, living this parallel universe for a little while, haven't we? And I've really enjoyed connecting recently with you. But I want to get into today about all things sports psych. So what better person to have on than your good self, the host of the acclaimed Sports Psych podcast. So how are you, Dan?
All the better for having the opportunity to speak with you. As to say, just to mirror what you said, I mean, we've been running our podcast probably for a similar amount of time, and we've communicated before. But it's just so awesome to be invited onto your show. I'm a long-term listener. I love every podcast that you do. So to get the opportunity to be here and shoot some stuff and go back and forth and see where our philosophies and beliefs and ideas lie. Awesome. Thank you so much for the invite.
No, likewise. And I always think that actually there's quite a nice little sort of co-supporting sort of feel to people who put stuff out onto audio. Before we get into sort of the sports psych stuff, can I just ask you, how have you found it over the years? Have you benefited from it? Is it a labour of love for you? Maybe we can just have a little bit of a co-support here, just about your podcast experience.
One of the best things I've ever done in my career, Steve. I don't know if you'd be as hyperbole about your experiences, but I've loved every second. I started just after I left England rugby back in, I want to say September 2018. And we kicked off with 3 episodes. And really, mine has shaped itself over the years to predominantly, not exclusively, but predominantly speak to academics from the world of sports psychology. I still sometimes have some episodes where I speak to coaches and speak to participants, competitors, but by and large to academics, and that's a personal bias, and also sort of looking at the marketplace and aligning it in a certain direction. It's a personal bias because I left academia many years ago after I finished my qualifications. I always wanted to be a sports psychology consultant, so I really wanted to connect back up with the academic world because there's just brilliant people there, in the world of sports psychology, just doing amazing research. And some of that research just doesn't see the light of day, as you know, and you can appreciate. So I was like, I've really got to get people on talking about their brilliant research, breaking this down for coaches, breaking this down for participants. And to be honest with you, in a slightly selfish way, helping me, understand this stuff. Because when you leave academia, when you read academic papers, you slip away from that language into probably more simplistic tones. So that's really what we do on the Sports Psych show. And it's number one, very selfishly, I'm going to say it's number one, a learning experience for me. Number two, I'd like to think it's a generous offer towards the sports psychology community to put it out there, ideas and the discipline itself out there into the world. I'm sure there's more reasons and advantages and benefits to doing it than that, but those would be the main ones. So I've loved every second of it. I think it's helped me become a more informed practitioner, a more open-minded practitioner, a more humble practitioner, to be honest, Steve, because if I was to reflect back, last thing to say here, if I was to reflect back slightly on my early career, I kind of thought I knew it all, you know.
Who
And
didn't? Who didn't, hey?
yeah, exactly. Well, all I can say is speak for myself, and I probably thought I did. So now I realize, it's that almost cliche to say it. I kind of know nothing. I'm in my mid-40s on that journey to try and know as much as I can. I'm probably not going to get past 25% of where I should. So it's been awesome. What about yourself?
Well, I mean, in a similar way, really, in the sense
Mm,
that actually one of the things of moving out into the sort of wild west of working for yourself, that you lose probably a lot of the direct camaraderie of network and conversations in the corridors. And so it's sort of artificially manufacturing that a little bit, but ultimately sort of CPD in the sense of me thinking about, okay, well, who would I love to have a conversation with? And being able to sort of go off and permission to have that in almost like a semi-public way. But I think for me, uh, a lot of the best development hasn't been sat listening to a lecture or at a conference, that formal sort of training. It's been sort of coffee-based conversations, and I suppose that's what I'm trying to conjure, probably in a different way, in the sense that my bias is probably for variety. So rather than just the same thing, which I think you serve the sports psych community so well, that's depth there. And I probably bring a bit of breadth of, right, let's get a jet fighter pilot on. and, and that's my curiosity of thinking, what does that world look like that I could beg, borrow, and steal some ideas from for my own thought, or just like, that'd be interesting.
And I think that's where our podcasts complement each other in terms of, as you said, arguably my depth, although yours goes in very deep as well, but your breadth is in your breadth of population. That's not to suggest that I'm not striving to get a breadth of population. I suppose I've just honed in on, understandably, the
Yeah.
sports psych side of things. But what I love about, we're going to have a love in here, Steve. What I love about
Yes.
what
You're
you
the
do,
best, Dan. You're the best.
you're amazing. What I love about what you do is, and I suppose I love it because it's through my own biased lens, because I think I try to host like this. And I always think I talk far too much. And I really do think so, just because I'm so passionate about what I do and this subject area, is that you have a conversation. As you said, it's a fireside chat, it's a conversation. It's not to suggest there's not great podcasts out there where hosts aren't just firing question after question. And the advantage of that is that, that kind of podcast, you're getting more of the guest, which is absolutely vital. And as I said, I probably need to tighten up as a host from that perspective. But I want to have a conversation. I want to have a chat. I want to add my thoughts as, somebody in front of me is unloading their thoughts, because I'm just curious as to what their response is, And so that's what I love about yours, is you're always giving some value judgment from your own real world experience, which I think is vital for anybody listening in.
Yeah, I'd probably say don't do that, and as in don't hold back too much, because
Mm,
if I'm listening to your podcast, I want to know what you think too, so
okay.
that there's that sort of bounce. The transactional interviewer
Mm.
of getting the best out of somebody, of course that's going to be important. But yeah, I would, when I'm tuning to you, I want to know what you think too on that subject. So um, maybe I'm just playing out my biases there. Hey, look, we can edit all of this out, can't we? Because we know we've got a little secret handshake of editing, can't we? We can sort of mix and match. I never said that. You never said that. We can just edit it afterwards, eh? Well, look. So let's dive in. Let's get in there. But I think probably before we get into it, because I don't know whether the Venn diagram um, of our listenership, I don't know how. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know whether people listen to the Supporting Champions podcast, listen to Sports Psych. I'm sure they will tune in now. But for those that don't, could you just give me that nice, hearty introduction to your good self?
So I am a former professional golfer, failed miserably. I probably do today what I do as a sports psychologist because of my experiences as a golfer. I picked up my first sports psychology. I put sports psychology in inverted commas because it was the inner game of tennis, which I suppose purists would say, well, that's not a sports psychology book, but it really is. I picked up Timothy Galway's Inner Game of Tennis at the age of 15 years old, probably when I should have been chasing girls. I was chasing knowledge about sports psychology. And so that built from there because I was ambitious to become the best golfer I could be. I wanted to be a pro golfer. I announced to my parents at 18 when I left school with appalling A levels that I was going to be the best golfer in the world, and then pretty quickly realized I wasn't going to quite challenge with Tiger Woods. I was quite some distance from that, so I went into my local pro shop, became a PGA professional, did all my exams. So I have a background of playing pro golf, albeit to a stunningly average level. Seeing sports psychologists at that time. My next book I read was Dr. Bob Rotella's Golf is Not a Game of Perfect. And I think two seminal books in sports psychology would be In a Game of Tennis and Golf is Not a Game of Perfect. Started to coach the game. And the wonderful thing about golf coaching is you are doing it all day, every day. I mean, literally, I coached at a range and it was 40 hours of lessons a week. Which I dialed down as I decided to take up that interest in psychology, and I started to do a degree in psychology as I was coaching golf. So it built from there, and then I did my master's degree and really got to a point. Okay, what do I do? And I left the golf behind because I really wanted to work across sports and potentially in some other domains as well. I wanted to work across sports. So I became a sports psychologist. I don't know. I really started working in this area. The foundations were 2005, 2006. I became HCPC registered a few years later. So sort of fully qualified and registered in that respect after some supervision. And that's what I've been doing ever since. And I've been proud to hold some positions in British sport that are reasonably substantial. Lead psychologist for England golf, lead psychologist for England rugby, working with Eddie Jones going into the last World Cup. I've held contracts at probably around half a dozen Premier League clubs. I would always say I've probably specialised in golf and football, soccer, if you like, but I've worked across all sports over the years. And right now I find myself working with a number of organizations, teams, individuals, probably most notably Aston Martin Formula One and Feyenoord football in the Dutch Eredivisie. And I host the Sports Psych show. I've written 4 books: Soccer Tough, Soccer Tough 2, Soccer Brain, Golf Tough. And I think that just about brings us up to speed.
Fantastic. Well, an incredible career. That failed athlete, failed performer kind of status as the sort of standard sports scientist.
Oh yes.
And I'd include all the way up to sort of Olympia in that. You know, a lot of people who I know have achieved at the top end who see their Olympic status. Oh, I didn't medal, so I didn't get a gold medal as a failure, which is an interesting concept in itself. But do you think that pro experience enriched your absorption of this topic of sports psychology, but also how you are as a practitioner too?
So I think even though as a practitioner, you'd always say that your work is based on largely empirical evidence. So much of what you do is going to be experiential. And it's not just experiential from the experiences you've had throughout your sports psychology career. It's also the experiences you've had throughout your playing career and through your coaching career. I mean, I would actually almost skip along a bit and say it was my coaching
Right.
experience that was really the foundation for everything that I do now. I mean, I had some wonderful experiences in my qualifications, and I've had some wonderful supervisors and mentors. However, I would always say that, standing at the golf club on the range, or standing at the driving range when I worked at the driving range, just having different people from different cross sections of society, having a few individuals in the morning, and then suddenly a group of 6-year-olds in the afternoon. I once even conducted an 8-year-old's birthday party. It was a golf birthday party, and I didn't dress up as a clown or anything, but I had to entertain 8-year-olds at this birthday party. Experiences like those have really shaped, I suppose, the psychosocial lens of the world that what I have now. And it's not to suggest I step into Aston Martin or Feyenoord and I start, I'm not suggesting the experience I had with 8-year-old kids is the prime mediator, but just being able to manage yourself as you engage, as I say, that cross section of society, the lawyer 1 minute, the housewife the next minute, the older golfer, the excellent young player, just a raft, a range of abilities, ages, levels, cross section of society. That's been hugely, I think that's the number one most influential. Number two, qualifications, probably then number three, playing career, because I'm always mindful of, get out of my own head there. That's what I experienced, but it's very important for me to be as neutral as I can possibly be, even though I don't think that's completely possible.
That's interesting. So that cross-sectional experience,
Mm.
what do you think that brings you? I sense that there is. Oh, yeah, I'll leave that as the question. What does that bring to your practice or your engagement with other humans that you feel is advantageous?
Patience and the tolerance for individual
Right. Okay.
differences,
Yeah. Right.
more than anything else, which backs up, we've spoken in the past, you and I, about, personality science. In fact, we've exchanged some notes, and it's an area that's vast and broad and extraordinarily complex. And I'm not suggesting for 1 second that coaches dive into personality science, but it certainly, as a sports psychology practitioner, it is a real interest to me, the complexity of the human, and actually that there are broad tendencies that we have. But those broad tendencies are still displayed through individuality. And so definitely I think my experiences as a coaching professional, dealing with different personalities as your lesson day unfolds, the science backs up individual differences. And I think it helps you appreciate them. It helps you be more tolerant and patient around them. And that's not to say one is always tolerant and patient of other people, because we're all human beings. But I think that would be the number one thing, is just dealing with individuals.
It's interesting because as you get more experienced, you are looking for a few shortcuts. You are looking for that sort of perceptive insight, but potentially I think you need a little bit of capacity to be able to do that. So you're looking for a few shortcuts of, yeah, I've got the experience of doing this before, or I've got a heuristic for this particular scenario, which then means you're sort of prejudging it. I've seen this before, as opposed to that curiosity of, what am I going to encounter? Where is this going to go? This could be completely novel as an experience, and keeping that at the forefront of your engagement with somebody. It's interesting. It's an interesting dynamic. As you get more experience, you have to still consider each case on its merits.
Really interesting point. And I think the word I really picked up on there is heuristic, because again, if I was to return to the science of personality, and I can only give you my understanding, if we suggest that the science demonstrates typical tendencies, and those typical tendencies, most characteristics load onto 5 traits. spelling out ocean: openness, conscientiousness, agreeableness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. Now, I'm not suggesting coaches need to know this. However, if one does pick up a book that gives reasonably good descriptions of the kind of facets that underpin those traits, then you do start to see patterns. So I completely agree with you. When you take an interest, if you read a couple of books on personality science and you just take a few notes and you start to think, okay, right, ocean, openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, take the trait of agreeableness, you'll notice within, and I try to search for this and scan for this disagreeable behavior, for instance, moments where people are disagreeable. And by and large, personality is that classic U shape, that bell shape, where most people lie in the middle. But you've got those outliers. You might have those people, those players in a team, for instance, who really have a tendency to be disagreeable. And so what I believe as a psychologist, what I think I know as a psychologist, is I would say, well, okay, the thoughts, emotions, and feelings and sensations that they're experiencing are happening to them. And the way they play out is they demonstrate that in terms of a personality. So that person is being disagreeable. It's not necessarily their fault. It's how they get along and get ahead, essentially. So again, I come back to, well, that gives me a patience and a tolerance for that. Okay, this person tends to be disagreeable. That's my little heuristic there, taken from Ocean. Okay, how can I deal with this? Maybe I'm going to actually take a breath if this person says something that I don't necessarily like, that might make me want to snap back. Maybe I'm going to be more curious about what this person is saying, because this person really is countering what I believe and what I'm trying to teach this person. Maybe it might be something I'm talking about with mental skills, and they go, no way, I disagree with that. That's a load of rubbish. That doesn't work for me. Okay, well, tell me about that. Talk to me. What might work for you? And actually, if that classic listening, expressing empathy, asking open questions, that sort of motivational interviewing stuff. Okay, now I'm starting to uncover that this person is disagreeable externally towards me in their environment, but there's ways to unpeel that where I can get to know this person and deal with that sense of disagreeableness that they have. Just because they're like that doesn't mean I can't help them. It doesn't mean I can't manage who they are or manage myself around who they are in order to find solutions here for them and for me with them.
And would you, I mean, obviously it's going to be contextual and what you're feeling and sensing in the time,
Yes.
but
Yeah.
would you be dialing up your disagreeableness or your task focus? Would you start sort of going toe to toe with, let's get it done. Let's cut the crap. I'm going to be as candid as you actually need. Or would you reflect the opposite, potentially because they might need a little bit more of that in their life?
Really good question. And I think that, as you said, to reflect what you said, context is going to matter. I would say in my role as a sports psychologist, by and large, I'm going to listen, empathize, and try to unpack where this person is coming from. However, again, context, there might be a sense of urgency here. There might be a sense of, actually, I think what I'm offering here, if maybe my relationship with that person has deepened over time, or maybe I just am in a position at a club where I don't want to use the word power, but I've been a part of the fabric of the club for quite some time, and I have trust with the coaches and trust with many players. So maybe I feel I'm in a position to be a little bit more challenging. And maybe I feel in this instance, it's in this person's best interest for me actually to challenge what they're saying. And so, especially if we're talking about something related to mental skills or psychology in general, I probably feel fairly competent to challenge that person. But again, how I challenge that person, I might just do that through questioning and probing and maybe trying to break down their argument rather than just being disagreeable back at them and clashing. Again, context matters. And of course, there are disagreeable people who quite enjoy having others be disagreeable back at them.
Yeah,
Again,
okay.
now that's where the complexity lies. You're like this, but who do you like me to be in this situation? Do you like that little bit of a clash? Does that actually gain some respect within your sphere of influence? So I think,
Yeah, okay.
yeah,
I'm fresh off watching the Mark Cavendish Netflix documentary,
okay.
and there's a little click with a new coach on the Quick Step team, a guy called Vasi,
Mm.
and who's very direct Greek approach. He's just, look, this is the way it is. This is what I know about Mark Cavendish. And they are just disagreeable with each other. And Mark Cavendish just says, I love it. And there's just that sense of, okay, you've got a reputation for perhaps being that person who will speak out if you don't like something, not to people please, but to tell it like it is. And and actually, this is a compliment. You don't probably, well, he's sort of a transmitting. I do not necessarily need you to mollycoddle the message. I love it if it's direct, and I love it if it's just get cuts to the heart of what we need. And I'm almost wondering whether in a sports psych relationship, whether it's better to declare in that contracting space, this is what it's like working with me, Dan. This is how I tend to approach it, um, and and if necessary, is it worth you playing that out to an athlete or a player and saying, I'm like this, and this is what I'm seeing from you.
I think my let me answer that first of all by saying my preferred state would be to be a bit of a chameleon, in as
Okay.
much as not a comedian, but a chameleon, in as much as I'm able to flex and adapt as best as I possibly can in correspondence with who's in front of me. And so I think my preferred approach would always be to be somebody who might feel the atmosphere and feel the in between, the relationship, the in between, in the room at that time, and act accordingly. That's not to suggest that when, interpersonally with my relationship with that person, that I wouldn't be authentic. I'm going to be authentic around the lunch table, the dinner table. I'm going to be authentic over a cup of coffee. But if I'm in a session, I'm going to be in my role as a sports psychologist, and then it's about reading the situation, reading the room, reading the person, feeling. But you're not going to get right all the time. Now, what I would know and what I would expect, I can't speak for any other sports psychologist and how they would go about it. What I would know and what I would respect is there's many coaches who would say, well, that's very nice, but I hold dear, I have principles about how I engage my athletes. And this is my style, this is my philosophy, this is my style, this is my coach head, as I call it. I have a little technique called coach head, and this is how I like to engage people, and that's something that they've got to deal with. That's a coaching decision. If coaching is about constant process of decision making, and you make the decision to be that kind of authentic self, irrespective of who's in front of you, I would say that both helps and hinders you. You've given us a situation where Mark Cavendish, for example, go, I love this. This is great. This is what I need. And it suits his temperament. That kind of approach might alienate another athlete. Now, it's not to suggest that coach that you're speaking of might not tone down the volume of that disagreeableness with another cyclist. Maybe he would. But I think it's a very interesting and complex landscape. You've always got to remember you're never going to get completely right, because you're dealing with human beings and you're a human being yourself. But it's that craft, isn't it, between the science and the art, to really try to tailor your communication given the situation.
Yeah, and I wonder whether that or just that simple observation, the difference between a coach as a leader, as the key decision maker on a team, versus the support person. The support person is there to try and boost others, and so potentially has to flex and adapt. And I'm always, it's an interesting topic, isn't it? That ultimately, I want to be the best person at supporting that person in that context for what they need in that moment. But I also need to be authentic to myself. I need to be consistent, that if I'm one way with one athlete and then I'm another way with another, and people are looking across, Steve's different today than, or different in that situation. It's an interesting one, isn't it? But potentially you're saying that for a coach or a leader or a manager, they've probably got a little bit more of a permission to choose to be the consistent side of it, but potentially less flexible side.
Consistency is heavily impacted by your consistency. By them, I mean the players or the athletes. I firmly believe that. What you were saying there made me think of a few things. I mean, first and foremost, the importance of co-coaching. If you're in an environment where you have the luxury of resources, as in other coaches, I always, the work I've done, let's say in football, soccer, and Premier League, you detect how important over time. You start to detect how important the manager or head coach, if you want to describe them like that, their co-coaches are, their assistant coaches, sorry, and perhaps potentially making sure that you've got coaches who complement your skills. You don't necessarily want someone to be the same, and you do want to have the conversations where you're making sure those assistant coaches are doing the kind of things that might not be aligned with the way you want to lead, as you say, or the way you want to go about your coaching. The second thing it made me think of is and not either or, but and also, I still think a manager or head coach, a leader, and still, what I'm not talking about is we go from one extreme to another, one end of the continuum to another, because as you quite rightly say, from a leadership perspective, we want a battery of consistency from a behavioral perspective. But it does make me think I can still have some flex, some shift, some adaptation in accordance to what the specific challenges of a player is, or the players in front of me, that I can be, I try not to caricature this, but I can be what might be considered a tough-minded coach. But I can be a tough-minded coach who demonstrates and displays empathy, for example. But that requires language skills. It doesn't necessarily require enormous emotional flexibility, but it does require language skills. So I think it's interesting, but again, there's no sweet spot as such. It's a constant day-to-day process of decisions and experimentation, and noticing things going on in your environment and noticing yourself, and go, where do I need to be as authentically me as possible? Where can I afford to adapt and flex a little bit?
That's quite a lot in that. I'm no, I love it. I mean, I'm just sort of, I'm riffing a few notes here, just at a very simplistic level. That coaching team being able to offer the versatility to support a breadth of people. And I'm just thinking a sort of simple analogy of good cop, bad cop type thing, of complementary perspectives that can support. I'm hearing kind of polarity management in terms of the idea that you could be tough but empathic. There's the wonderful phrase that came out of British cycling, which was, I say wonderful. It's so wonderful. It's not on the tip of my tongue. Compassionate ruthlessness. That's what it was. That sense that we can be ruthless in our decision making, but compassionate in how we deliver that. So that was lovely. I love that phrase, battery of consistency. That's lovely. That is. Can I just find out the origin or the meaning behind that? Because that sounds as though I've got a battery and I've got some capacity and I can get drained. I'm going to provide you with some consistency if I'm on full power. But if I'm impaired and I'm fatigued or I'm under pressure, I might be a little bit depleted and need charging. Am I reading too much into that, Dan, or is that because that's a
Not at
great
all.
phrase?
Yeah, no, look, I made it up on the spot. But what I was kind of picturing was, as you said, that notion of having plentiful energy. I think it's almost, the analogy is twofold from a battery perspective. It's a battery being a whole lot of, and battery being energy, in as much as I want to exercise a whole lot of behaviors. And if I can do that, then I'm a very adaptable coach. At the same time, using the analogy of a battery from an energy perspective, is when I've depleted in energy, when my stores of sugars and glucose in my frontal lobe, if you want to see it that way, have depleted, then I don't necessarily have the room to flex and adapt. So yeah, it becomes tougher. I've read some stuff here on, without getting too neuroscientific here, but I read some stuff on your brake system, your
Mm,
willpower system. Your brake system is in the front part of your brain. I think it's the ventrolateral prefrontal cortex. And obviously your go system, your goal-oriented system, is also your front part of your brain. So you're kind of pressing down the accelerator and the brake at the same time. And so if you're constantly having to manage who you are throughout the day, then of course you're going to deplete your stores of energy. So I kind of see the battery from that perspective as well.
mm,
Um,
love that.
if I can draw upon something you said there as well, you were talking about, I mean, I wrote down that compassionate ruthlessness, and it was making me think of the balance between stretch and support. I mean, a lot of people talk about the balance between challenge and support, but stretch and support, and how we do that as a head coach, a leader, or a coaching unit. And it comes back to that co-coaching as well, in as much as, yeah, I could be the ruthless leader. And absolutely, you mentioned good cop, bad cop from a basic perspective. Of course, absolutely. The person from the helicopter viewpoint, could be overlooking things and be that proverbial bad cop, if you like, and the good cop could be one of the assistant coaches, or one of the assistant coaches, who goes in and, the classic arm around the shoulder. But when you said compassionate ruthlessness, and I was thinking of stretch and support, it also made me think of the direction of stretch and support. And it's stretching the process, supporting the person, stretching the process and supporting the person. That feels like a wonderful juxtaposition to possess as a coaching unit, because if we can really stretch somebody within their performance process, mindset process, but support them as a person as well. That's a very basic thing to say, but if you unpack that, that's quite tough to do and complex.
Okay, interesting. No, thanks for following up on those. That's a nice differentiation there about stretching the process, because I suppose challenge or stretch, if they are synonymous, or there's a refinement by using the word stretch versus challenge, I suppose to a certain extent, the challenge can, if it feels like I'm going to personally challenge you, that could feel quite confrontational. Whereas potentially stretching the process, the tasks ahead, these are the steps, this is the road ahead. As a leader, that's a key responsibility to you anyway, to show where people are going. That's a nice differentiation. So, can I just pivot there a little bit and pick up on your work in teams? Who is your client? And I guess that is going to depend upon the terms and conditions that you've signed up to in a contract. But principally, and I'm going to try and pin you on this a little bit, as in it's not just, oh yeah, coach, player, CEO, but who is your primary focus when you're going into a team environment? There's lots of people you're going to need to support or please or develop or account to. Where is your focus?
I'll answer this in the way I think you want me to answer it. In as much as
I'll tell you at the end.
No, because you want me to really pinpoint something. So, because you're quite right, the normal stock answer is, well, and it's almost like, well, who isn't my client? It's like, well, I work with this person, that person. I'm in the middle, and I go over here, and I go. I think that's a standard answer, and I think it's not bad. Probably a correct answer. If we want to pinpoint something, and this might be a controversial thing to say in the world of sports psychology right now, because everything is coach, 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 with and through coaches. And my answer is still going to be related to that. It's the player or the players. It just has to be, because ultimately that's where the action is at. That's what these organizations exist for. So ultimately, my number one client is the player and the players, as in the team. How I go about doing that is a conversation to be had. I am a practitioner who still wants to work directly with players, because I believe, and I'm going to say this in a humble way, that even though in sports psychology we love to say, wow, yeah, we work with and through coaches, we work with and through the support staff, and that exists, and it's very, very important. The physio is the physio because they have expertise of physiotherapy. The doctor is the doctor because they have expertise of being a doctor of medicine. The coach is the coach because they have expertise of football and rugby and the activities that have to be delivered within sessions. I'm a sports psychologist. Now, I suppose that makes me, I'd like to think, somewhat of an expert on human behavior within a sports setting. That's what I can offer. I can work directly with players. I have frameworks that help me to help players muddle through conundrums, build frameworks that help them participate, progress, and perform, engage, learn, and compete. And I can do that in a way that others in that environment can't do, just as I do not know how to put on a rugby session or a football session or teach a cyclist to get around the track quicker without talking about psychology. One way to put it is like this, and I said this recently on another podcast, is my dad was a London taxi driver for 50 years. If you ask any old Joe who's a Londoner who drives quite a bit in London, get me from, I don't know, Paddington, Westminster, they may well have an idea of how to do that, okay? My dad has 10, 20 different ways. And if there's a traffic jam, okay, he knows the back routes. By that, I mean, it's similar for me when I sit down with players, is that I've got lots of different ways to help with lots of different mental challenges, just like all sports psychs do. So I'm saying this, Steve, because that's a message I want to get across, is I do think in sports psychology, we need to be very careful with our messages. However, of course, we also work with and through coaches. So to get to players, we work with and through coaches. We work with and through support staff. We might work with and through back room teams as well. We're working individually. We're working from a team perspective. We're working from a systemic perspective as well. But ultimately, if you were to pin me down and say, who is your client? It has to be, unless somebody says, you're only working with the back staff, well, that's different. But ultimately, in an organization, if I'm coming in, I want to make an impact, I have eyes for the players, their behavior, their frameworks, how they're going about things. Now I go about it I can go about it that in a multitude of ways.
Love that. Okay, very, very clear, and I like the analogy of transporting someone from somewhere to something, because that's got a physical feel, but it also means, I guess, we're going to develop you. And I suppose, to riff on that metaphor, sometimes you could be Transport for London and sort of shut down the tube system if you need to, and shift things about if you're working through coaches. That fundamentally, we're going to take a different approach to transport today because the London Marathon's on, or we've got something big coming up, something like that. Does that work? I don't know if that. I just made that up. You made up battery of consistency. I just made up
No, I love
shutting
it.
down
No,
the transport system for London Marathon being similar to a coach psychologist.
I love it. You're broadening the analogy, and I think it works very well. And I think I want to be clear here that, you know, one of the number one conversations I'm having with coaches is you're on the grass. You're on the grass, so you're going to be you. Here's the thing. Here's the subtle difference. You're not a sports psychologist per se, but you do psychology every second of every minute of every day in your role. And there's some coaches who are just so good at doing it that you could argue they're far better than myself or my colleagues at doing the personal stuff in the style in which they do it. It's just I have the frameworks that kind of aids the delivery. But I can also help coaches build on their skills by having those frameworks. And obviously, if we start to create shared mental models within the organization, if I bring into, let's say, an organization, so I did this and I can talk, you know, at surface level about this, you know, in the Feyenoord football organization, who compete in the Dutch Eredivisie League, they won the Eredivisie last season. And one of the things that I am passionate about is trying to create shared mental models around the mental side of things, because obviously 101 with coaching at the adult elite level, the professional level, is they want to try to create shared mental models around the game model. You know, they want through, you know, visual perception, a player to be able to notice what another player is doing and you know, and keep their team shape and play together and so on and so forth. Well, I have a passion about players being able to work together around the mental side of the game, rather than just completely isolating things. And I work with Joe over there and Steve over there, but I don't work with David and I don't work with Brian. I actually want to find a way where we can still keep things individually specific, but at a systemic level, as a club, as a group of staff, coaches, coaching staff and support staff, in amongst the players, we can all have this shared mental model. So, for example, at Feyenoord, I use the term HPM and LPM, high performance mindset and low performance mindset, just to bring some language into the room that can resemble a differentiation between a good mindset and a not such a good mindset. Now we can start having great conversations around what this looks like from an individual perspective, what coaches can do to support HPM and LPM, what support staff can do, and potentially what we're doing across the system to make sure the environment supports HPM and LPM. That is what I am very passionate about doing.
And give us a few examples of what that would look like. So I suppose we've got the either or the compliance with high performance kind of thinking behaviors, or actually this is eroding or undermining our performance, that low performance. I'm going to just describe those as that.
Yeah.
Are you talking about here dynamics in the team that everybody is responsible for, accountable for, and might bear consequences if it's not there, of shifting each other, calling each other out, encouraging and praising behaviors that amplify that? Are these things like behavioral norms and psychological safety, the bonds between people that allow people to perform?
Good question. I think that's the top of Everest. I think when you've got, certainly if we're talking about players, because we obviously have coaches striving to hold players accountable for certain things, but when you get players holding each other accountable, then you're talking the top of Everest. But where does that start? It's very difficult for players to hold each other accountable in any other way than a sort of a surface level, having a little bit of a dig at each other, for, you know, from time to time, you know, a little bit of a come on guys, come on, let's get this right type thing. The kind of maybe cheerleading support that you might see from a basic perspective. Now, if we start to create a language there, just starting with HPM, LPM, that can be related to behaviors, which I'll come on to in a second, which you've posed, Absolutely. Now, if you can start to, even if you just break it down to a small group of players and just those, it might be 4 or 5 in a team. If they're holding each other accountable, then that's 4 or 5 players in the team. If they've got a language, if you just got a pod of players, if you like, and within that pod, some pairs of players that hold each other accountable, peer-to-peer learning, if you like, from that perspective, wow. Now we can start to make a difference. Now, in terms of what that looks like, it could be broad, but if I was to break it down this way, and let me throw a hypothesis at you that, let's say, we're in a room, you and I, and we're addressing a team of players, and you've got the coaching staff and you've got the support staff, and we put up on our PowerPoint HPM and LPM, and we talk about, okay, we're going to have HPM and LPM, but this is a framework. We're not going to define what that looks like. We're going to leave you to define what that looks like, but we're going to prompt you. We're going to give you, we're going to give you some borders and boundaries here. This is where I love. We talk in psychology all the time about values, and values are wonderful and marvelous and fantastic. And values-driven organizations can be extraordinarily powerful. And you on your show have had brilliant people who've talked about the power of values-driven cultures. I am interested as well in action-oriented words, Steve. I'm interested in those behaviors that you speak about. And because I suppose I'm a consultant that's very interested in starting on the pitch, the court, the course, the track, and broadening things out from there. So I just wonder, if you and I are standing in front of a group of players, support and coaching staff, and we put up on a wall a whole bunch of action-oriented words, adjectives, if you like, energy, relentless, dominant, strong, relaxed, focused, calm, joyful. Think of adjectives that change nouns, right? Think of adjectives that are meaningful, essentially actions, right? Now, I've done this, and I did this with the club that I'm speaking about right now. Give us 3 words. What 3 adjectives, what 3 action words are the most meaningful to us on the field of play when we go and compete? I can guarantee you, or at least I strongly believe, that those action words can be so broad in meaning, we can branch them out into everything, or they can branch out into anything. So let's imagine that the team in front of us, Steve, picked energy, strong and focused. Energy, strong and focused. Now, I think this is really interesting, because I think we can start to relate all behaviors towards that, from important high performance behaviors right the way through to well-being protocols and practices, mental health practices, from things around participation to things around learning to things around performance itself. And that could be with energy, strong and focused. Well, how are we going to be focused? What little things are we going to do in training to make sure that we're focused? How are we going to help each other be focused? You can go from granular detail through to broader definitions of focus. Strong. Well, strong to an individual can be strong in the air, strong in a challenge, through to mentally strong, through to being strong coming back from injury, being strong with determination in the gym. I think these action words, these adjectives, are wonderful ways to break down the kind of granular behaviors that we all want to engage in. And we can have just 3 and build from there. And I think we can start to have great conversations in pods, in pairs, peer-to-peer learning, coaches with players, coaches with the support staff, just around 3 words. I think that's a powerful place to be.
And I might come back to you on this, because I remember a post that you put up, which was fascinating, about the response of the England and the Italy football team in the European final. I might come back to that. It was hold and play, which I think was the two words that you posted. But I'll, if I can pause that. But what's just coming to the surface of my mind here is that, because what you described is really simple, it's tangible, it's empowering, it's easy for people to remember and work with. But I suppose the thing that's in my mind is, what if you've got a group of people that can't be asked? What if the sea of ocean, i.e. conscientiousness, is not there? How do you engage people who might be varied but have contributions to a team, but they're doing it on their terms? They're not necessarily doing it by dedication and conscientious approach. How do you, because if somebody comes back and says, oh, energy, yeah, I'm best when I don't work that hard, I rest quite hard, or strong, yeah, that's me when you don't bother me, or focus, yeah, I know how to focus. What if somebody is fobbing you off or fobbing the team off, when actually they are trying to avoid perhaps some of the harder work?
And these things happen, and I would say the fact that these things happen, and you sometimes teams comprise of a lack of conscientiousness. I've been in amongst them, and the very first thing I would say is all the more reason to do this activity or exercise, leading to my second point, which will be, then we need to have better conversation. Then my conversation, I can only speak from my perspective, is with the coaching staff in terms of, great, look what this uncovers.
Okay.
Now what we have to do is start having conversations between ourselves in terms of how we collect the appropriate data. That might be just observational behavioral data. That might be actual data from games that demonstrate that these players aren't engaged in these three words, for example. So it creates better conversations between myself and the coaching staff and the support staff. We can get together, we can brainstorm ways to create conscientiousness around these three words. So we're almost taking a step back and going, well, this is what the team says it wants to do. This is what we created in the room. What we're now starting to uncover is a little bit of withdrawal from HPM. Actually, a lot of them are down in LPM, or a lot of them don't fully understand or have mythical ideas about how they get into HPM. We need to challenge that, but we don't know that until we've created that. So we need to have that. It instigates better conversations between us as a coaching unit, which then helps us to better challenge players. How we challenge players will depend on the player or players in front of you. So again, that comes full circle back to the first things we were talking about is, do we lead with empathy, or do we actually lead with a sort of an audacious, disagreeable challenge to a player? Again, it will depend on context, who that player is. There's that famous story that Carlo Ancelotti wrote about with Zinedine Zidane, who was late for the team bus. And I think Ancelotti wanted to leave him behind. And basically a few players, and I'm butchering this story, but basically a few players said, no, we don't do that, mister. We've got to let him on the team bus and he comes with us. And on reflection, he realized this was a person that I had to give more rope to in that respect. And so there's that. There's one more thing I want to say about this. So you're going to have better conversations, which means you can get to know your players better. And then I think what it requires, and the next thing is to strip it back. You do need to find allyship somewhere. And I think in any environment, Steve, you're still going to get the players who you can find allyship with. You're going to get some leaders who do this better than others. And so we strip it back, get 2, 3, 4 of them in a room. Right. We are now allies with this. We're going to work on this together. We're going to find another ally and another ally and another ally. We're going to create 2 pods. Can we create another pod? Can we broaden and build from just 1, 2, 3, 4 players? That to me is very powerful, because that's what I'm looking for at the beginning of any engagement. Can you put me in front of the captain? Does that captain have an ally? Does that ally have another ally? Okay, we've got 3 people in the room. Now we can start working on HPM with them, if the feeling is we can't put this in the room of the entire team. So I think that's how I would look at that challenge.
So I'm hearing a little bit of social connection, a bit of a sense of responsibility to each other. We're social species. We're going to be wired that way. If we're feeling like we're being backed, or that we have comrades, that perhaps we're going to be leaning in and protecting them. We're going to be protecting that principle. What's the, excuse the simplistic question, but what about the sort of selfish, the self-oriented personalities? I'm not talking about the sort of low conscientiousness here, but it's just sort of inherently about me. How do you switch that to being more value to the team? And I suppose team players are great, but you're going to have to put up with some people that might be more maverick, but perhaps are more self-oriented.
Yeah, and I think I want to envelope my answer, and I think you'd agree and appreciate this, that as we sit here or stand here now, we're talking about this. We're in our living room or our lounge, and it's so easy to talk about this stuff. It's the difference between simple and easy, isn't it? Sorry, it's simple to talk about this stuff. It's not easy to go and execute it, because human beings are complex. So anybody listening in will go, "Oh, that sounds very nice, but it's really difficult to execute in real life." And it damn well is. You and I have been in these environments. We know how tough and challenging tough human challenges are. So, but it's a really, really good question. And again, my first response to that is actually detecting how that selfishness helps that person and therefore helps us, and how that selfishness hinders that person and therefore hinders us. Because again, we're going to go back to the nature of personality science. The nature, what are traits for? Traits are there to help human beings get along and get ahead, in very simple terms. So they all exist. They're all fit characteristics, if you like. Being disagreeable. So when you use the term selfish, that to me comes under the umbrella term of trait of agreeableness, or being disagreeable. Well, being disagreeable helps people. This is why I'm often on social media getting wound up about posters that say "be coachable." Well, you know as well as I do that some of the best athletes on the planet are quite challenging to coach, and maybe as they should be, because they're demanding of you as a coach. And often they know their own mind, they know their own body, they know their own technique. So don't come at me with "these people are coachable." They're not necessarily. So actually disagreeableness can be built into these environments a lot. So then it's about trying to detect how this helps them, how this hinders them. And then we come full circle back. Well, how do I start this conversation? It's possibly not going to be me. It's probably going to be the head coach. So it's upskilling the head coach to be able to have that negotiation. And I think it's a negotiation with a lot of these players. But that negotiation requires the subtle hand, or the subtle art of questioning, to really uncover how they see the world, how they see the game, how they see their game. And then trying to detect the kind of the little cues and clues where you go, "Oh, I'm not sure about how they're thinking there. I really think I can challenge that one." But then also noticing the kind of things where you can go back and go, "I really love what you said there. I appreciate what you're saying, and I understand that's how you see the game. And yep, I'm with you there. Can I reinforce that for you? Can I help you with that at all? How can I be involved there?" So I think it's understanding how selfishness, disagreeableness helps us, and then reinforcing how and why it helps us. and then finding a way to challenge through conversation, questioning, negotiation, the selfishness that doesn't help us, to help that person as best as you possibly can as a coach to onside that player as best as you can. There's always going to be players that are impossible to onside in your given context. And sometimes those players just have to leave your coaching culture. It's just the reality of it.
Interesting. I think that idea about being coachable, I think top players, top athletes need to be discerning. They should be filtering, is this valuable to me? Have I got capacity to take this on as well? And that's not to say that people have got, unlimited resources to absorb it, or they should be being lazy and or less conscientious, less industrious. But a discerning filter of, is this really helping me, I think is absolutely essential for people to perform at the top level. Otherwise, they become cluttered and unfocused, I think.
I love what you said there, and I think it's really well said. And therefore, I almost see what you've said there as a check and challenge on what I'm saying about HPM and LPM, for example, because I mosey into the building and go, "Hey, everybody, HPM, LPM, let's break this down." Now, I would always argue, "Hey, come on, 3 action-based words, HPM, LPM, that's not too hard, is it? That shouldn't cognitively overload you." But the reality is there are going to be some people in the building who would go, "Oh, wow." At least their instant response is, "That's just too much." And so you're not, that's going to be the person or people that you're not necessarily going to onboard instantly. But I'm almost giving myself a check and challenge there from what you're saying, because again, let's come back to, it's complex. It's in the gray. It's not black and white. There's no such thing as an intervention where you just go in and have an easy ride. You really, really don't. There's no magic dust.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. No, don't give it up. No, I'm going to coach you back onto that. I think energy. I mean, my ad would be energy, strong, focus. If those are the 3 active words that we're going with as our example, when it matters, and that sense of just, you don't have to be necessarily switched on all the time and full on energy, tying your boots up. It could be, in the last minutes of the game, or it could be, and therefore that requires you to be doing this training to have focus when it matters on a penalty spot, for example, but that requiring a certain set of conditions that lead into that. That's my interpretation of making it a little bit more ubiquitous for teams to adopt more wholly, as opposed to, there are values, we put them on the wall and therefore magic happens. That sense. Look, can I pick up on that example that I think, if I can try and remember it accurately, I probably should have dug it out before we spoke, but your response to, I think it was England versus Italy, and I don't know whether there was truth behind the words of, I think you got 1-1, extra time, and England were talking about holding. Or it might have been 1-0 to England, actually, and holding.
Yep.
And Italy had a word which was play. And I suppose that active, that passive word, the hold part, felt like it was an inhibitory, like, let's just cope, as opposed to let's be active and do what we're doing best. Now, perhaps you can clarify as to whether there was any accuracy behind the sort of origin of that, but it really was illuminating for me about what potentially could be triggers, or what a coach might need to be amplifying and reinforcing for players to be focusing on under the pressure of a final or the heat of an arena. Conscious that you also enveloped earlier saying this is easier to chat about but harder to do, and that's true. But please, if you could lean into that topic and just help me a little bit with it.
It's a topic I love to talk about, and I'm going to open my answer by saying I am not that they'd care whether I'm a fan or not, but I just think the work done by the English FA is absolute. They're silently drifting into just being the most outstanding performance organisation. I don't want that sound over the top, but what they're doing is just absolutely fantastic, and they're helping. They're doing exactly what they wanted to do, which was to help England go deep into tournaments. You know, I said this about the Women's World Cup. They lost, okay, but Spain were brilliant. But wow, deep in tournaments, they've won one there on the women's side, on the men's side, semi-finals, quarterfinals, and so on and so forth. So look, please, and there's brilliant people, not least two incredible sports psychs behind them, doing great work with open-minded coaches who are working with them. Incredible team. And so simple and easy, simple to talk about, not easy to do. I think the Italy-England final was so interesting because it was just this archetypal case study of avoidance behavior, going into behavioral inhibition, if you like. There's this iconic 20th century, he passed away, I think it was about 2007, Geoffrey Gray, who was a psychologist, known to be a polymath in as much as just an expert on so many different areas, topics, but wonderful psychologist who spent much of his career dedicated to studying what he described as the biological basis of personality. Stunningly simple terms, because, Steve, I'm nowhere near knowledgeable enough or intelligent enough to go hugely deep into this, but in simple terms, the brain will work in two ways: away or towards, to approach or to avoid. Towards rewards, away from punishment, essentially. His two terms are behavioral activation system and behavioral inhibition system. If we think of behavioral inhibition as hesitancy and an inhibition, it's inhibited, rather than a positive intent. Rather than a positive intent, it's an inhibition. We've become a little bit more hesitant in our execution of actions and our anticipation and decision making. Maybe our anticipation decision making suffers because our awareness closes off slightly. Our environmental awareness, anticipation slows, decision making suffers. Maybe the front part of our brain closes down slightly. That's not absolutely how it happens, but go with that. Our capacity to access maybe the performance plan isn't as good as it should be. That's behavioral inhibition. And in essence, it's that classic fight, flight, and freeze, fight, flight, freeze. Just this switches off because it's run away. Okay. Hesitancy, inhibition, hesitancy. Now, interestingly, in that final, the technical report from FIFA, and I can tell you that David Moyes was a part of that technical report. Aitor Karanka, the former Middlesbrough manager, wonderful coach, was part of that technical report. And in that technical report, they talked about the shift in possession, the deep lying English shape. Talking slightly over my head here because this is football coach stuff. So they talked about maybe the lack of effective challenges or the lack of challenge. I think it was Gareth Southgate himself said something crazy like we didn't commit a foul for 50 or 60 minutes, which isn't necessarily a demonstration of wonderfully timed tackles. It's just a demonstration of don't mess up here, hesitancy and inhibition. I believe that was the stat. I may have butchered it, so I apologize if I have. We started to play, in my terms, I would say we started to play back foot rather than front foot. This was we went 1-0 up after about 3 or 4 minutes. And from about the 20th minute, it was just all Italy. We played back foot rather than front foot, with fear rather than with freedom. Arguably, we started to play not to lose rather than on the front foot to win. It was those kind of mindset shifts in my opinion, and I think behaviorally we saw this. So is that a team that is incapable of executing said tactics or strategy? Or is this a team that is engaged in certain individuals and potentially collectively in inhibition, in hesitancy? I think it's that. I think it's the latter. Now, this, if I may, and we won't dwell on this because we've talked about this, but this is where I think the day-to-day language combined with the day-to-day narrative combined with the specific objectives that are placed as important for players is vital. And that's why I think it's so vital that bringing in these terms, for example, and I'm not saying they're the only terms, HPM, LPM, if the language becomes we play HPM no matter what. Now, let's be clear. I can strategically or tactically play conservatively. I can have a team shape that lines up in a conservative manner, defensively, if you like, but still play HPM, still play on the front foot. Just as like a golfer, I can aim for the middle of the green, but execute my swing with a cocky confidence. I can execute a committed swing, but aim for the middle of the green. And we can go on to England cricket here if you want to talk about that, because I wrote articles on this as well. The potential conflict, and again, amazing stuff, but again, the potential conflation between mindset and strategy. I can make a forward defense, but I can do so with a positive intent, right? So strategically, I can play conservatively, but still be an HPM. So for me, you have to siphon mindset while understanding mindset is going to be impacting and influencing all the other components. But siphon mindset and say, we have to know what our HPM is. We have to, and if we take those three words of energy, strong, focused, you could potentially put up a strong argument that England against Italy from the 20th minute onwards weren't with energy, strong and focused. And that's not to criticize anybody whatsoever, because when you get in there, that is damn hard to do, you know, and I've drowned amidst all of that, you know, in certain consultancy positions, irrespective of feeling like I have the answers, because you're dealing with 25 players, if you're talking about a football squad, in front of you, and it's complex. But behavioral activation to me is what one needs in the shape of, let's say, HPM, in the shape of individual and a team mental framework. I think that is vital.
And just to be clear there, it's not about England per se, or it's not about Italy per se. It's about the scenario. It's about a gazillion number of scenarios where you might be leading and you want to retain that lead, or you might be behind and you want to go and get something, or that you're drawing and that might be good enough. And so what's fascinating there is whether that is something that actually you could intervene and observe that spiral happening, or that inhibition creeping in, and do something about it in order to try and change the narrative, to change the tone, to change the focus, to get people leaning in, or whether that is something, and it could be a both here, that you need to play out as a scenario, that you choose your decisions beforehand of this scenario, and therefore this is you know, we're choosing our witty remarks beforehand, as Churchill would say. You know, finding that out before the pressure comes, practicing it, reinforcing it, so that it becomes more natural and a default position rather than a response.
And to play on what you're saying, this is the interesting juxtaposition, is that I suppose the traditional form of striving to change in the moment is a tactical change, which absolutely works, you know, because you're changing a tactic, you're changing behaviors, you're changing the lens of the world of your players in that moment. So of course that can work. My argument is that if as an organization, a club, a team, you make a decision to bias the narrative towards our job on the pitch is to execute the game plan, the game model in our HPM, our high performance mindset, as individuals and as a team. And that narrative runs through everything: activities, sessions, mini conversations in the medical department, and so on and so forth. Individual meetings, player development programs, individual frameworks for match day. If it runs through everything, then I think you have a greater chance of creating individual brains, and I suppose a collective brain, but individual brains that predict more along the lines of, when we meet adversity, then we respond in this manner. You're creating that blueprint. There is something about, to come back, I've got a couple more things to say. There's something about defending a lead, for example, that taps into behavioral inhibition, that takes you away from positive intent. I mean, riffing on an idea, hypothesizing something, it could be an evolutionary thing, that if I, as caveman, have to, caveman or cavewoman, have to protect my family in the cave, I am going to be a little bit more hesitant about what I'm going to do, think a bit more, which isn't necessarily what we require when the saber-toothed tiger is lurking outside, and therefore might not, respond accordingly or appropriately. So there's something about protecting something that might cause us to find inhibition. I think the final thing to say there, this is where I always riff on the idea of Manchester. Let's take Manchester City right now. If we're talking about football, soccer, Manchester City are Manchester City, not just because they are a team full of amazing players, but they are Manchester City because everybody else perceives them to be Manchester City. And so subsequently, it inhibits players prior to playing, which then taps into this inhibition on game day. I think there is, in my experience, there's some truth to that. And my experience of working in medical departments, listening to language, listening to the conversations, listening to the meaning making that is going on. Hey, we're playing Chelsea at the weekend. Oh, we never beat them. Oh, we always do well against them. Oh, they've got that. This is happening at the moment. I'm not saying that nothing unidimensional. I'm not saying that's the only thing. Performance is multidimensional, but that is an interesting mediator of mindset come game day. So I think it's an interesting landscape.
And so, and I've got a further sort of follow-up question to what you've just described, but that last point was quite interesting. Do you think that needs to be nipped in the bud? Do you think that needs to be managed in terms of just, hey, look, let's give ourselves a chance here. Let's start to have a different conversation about what could be, what might be, or that if they are so dominant, then why not play with more freedom? To try things out, to take risks. If the game and the result is always a foregone conclusion, let's learn from it. Is there a different? What's the opportunity there that should be happening rather than these little sloppy, that's my word, not yours, conversations creating the narrative before the performance has happened?
Yes, to everything you said, in as much as I would love players to be more thoughtful around their language and the feeling, the emotional temperature, the emotional temperature that creates contagion around the organization, the feeling of the organization, but how that is so often driven by language. Now, obviously, it would be slightly finicky to try to pick people up on the point here, a point there, something said, and it would be quite I suppose top-down command style if you walked around the training ground, for example, and policed everybody into speaking a certain way. But just striving to have the kind of conversations where you try to check and challenge. What kind of conversations are you having with yourself today about our game at the weekend? What conversations are you having with others? And then if we have the right framework in place within the team or the organization, then we can refer back to that. I can't wait to play Chelsea at the weekend. I can't wait to play City at the weekend. I can't wait for this qualifying at the weekend. It's going to be so much fun being in our high performance mindset. It's going to be joyful. Awesome. Now we're bringing in a bit of positive psychology. Now it's sort of shifting meaning around let's gratitude. Wow, we're playing City the weekend. What a great opportunity, as you say, to play with freedom, to take some risks, to open up a little bit, to execute the responsibilities in my role to the very best of my ability. I can't wait. That's going to be awesome. Again, that's not going to guarantee a great game for an individual or for a team at the weekend. But I would argue it gives you a better chance. It manages emotional temperature individually and across the team, and across the team, the emotional contagion. I think that's a fascinating area for coaches to really think about, a thought experiment around that together, and to dive in on how do you impact that.
Fascinating. And you mentioned it as the sort of top of Everest in that sense of having resourceful players ultimately that are managing, that are intuitive, that are interpreting scenarios, that are socially adept and aware, but then creating agents of change, that they are making the changes that are necessary, or that you're where in the development of a player is that best developed or created or supported? How could you, if you were to sort of think utopian version of sports psychology, that you're intervening and helping people at a certain point, where's the future direction here?
Your textbook answer here is, at younger age group levels, where you can infiltrate your activities in your sessions with psychosocial skills, your leadership, your teamwork, striving to be as autonomy supportive as you can possibly be. And I think there's a lot of I think as sports psychologists, we talk a lot about the importance of autonomy supportive coaching. And I think there's some overzealous comments made sometimes, or approaches being suggested. I think sport does need to be educational. By that I mean every sport has its principles, its rules, its guidelines, its probably optimal technical movements. Although that's an area of debate, of course. We have to teach sport. I firmly and strongly believe that. So an array of teaching strategies, coaching strategies, if you like, really, really important, but blended in within those coaching strategies, those teaching strategies, has to be opportunities for young people to learn how to lead, to learn how to team, whether that's holding each other accountable. For example, just engaging them in peer-to-peer coaching, giving them an opportunity to coach each other, giving them an opportunity to organize game day to a degree. I do think, if, again, very basic thing to say here, and I'm going to bastardize the truth, but let's go with it, a continuum from coach-led to in the middle, player-centered, to at the end, player-driven. Again, your coaching educators and developers would scold me for that continuum, but essentially, if we can give players experiences up and down that continuum, where maybe we have to coach them command style at time, or assign tasks to them within the boundaries of deliberate practice, but at the same time, from a player centered perspective, we might start to ask the kind of divergent and convergent questions that helps them think about the answers, that gives them an opportunity to brainstorm the actions that they have to engage in, right the way down to player driven, where maybe they're setting the tone for certain practices, certain activities and arrangements and so on and so forth. So this blend of coaching styles, teaching styles is so important. And making sure that we understand that that is helping us to help young people engage in these psychosocial skills. But we can't be scared of it at first team level, Steve. And I think, again, in the environments I've been in, not all the time, but often, perhaps the lens of the world is, we're about these game models and we've just got to teach the game model and we've just got to help players sustain or maintain their skills. And I think there are so many, again, another little thing that I play with as a sports psychologist is saying, if you as coaches believe yourselves to be sports psychologists, or you, and truth being that you are psychologists on the grass, great. So be the psychologist. So how do we help these players get better at being leaders? Not just here's an armband, but really, how do we help them be better leaders? Well, there's got to be protocols in practices, whether it's as simplistic as we get them in a huddle and they're communicating together more and we facilitate on the outside, or whether it's actually taking that whiteboard out there and getting the players to do some brainstorming here. Again, leaders, how do we help them be better leaders if they're not educated consumers of this stuff? How do we help them be better teammates if they're not experiencing teamwork Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, going into the weekend? We've got to inject that into our coaching practices. It's got to start at youth level, which it does so much in so many good academies, in so many great talent development pathways, but it's got to continue into the developmental phase at 18s to 23s, into the first teams, the elite development programs.
Yeah, passionate campaign for that. I'm wondering whether that sort of, I know we're getting into sort of idealistic territory here, but I guess the more and more environments I've worked in, the more I see that actually the top jobs, CEOs, technical directors, the C-suite, they actually probably could do with some of the at least the literacy about what's going on psychologically for people, so that they're better able to support it, because that sort of environmental aspect, it's very hard for staff in a business, for players to drive that if it's being suppressed, inhibited, undermined by the top. Is that an area that you can sort of see as an opportunity to further improve at least the conversation about how we're going to approach our performance in the future?
And I think I'm going to try and answer this way that doesn't belittle or insult anybody. I think that in sport, sometimes the people who might be at the business level, let's just call it that, who are doing incredible work, at front office. I think for me, where I've tried to make an impact, if I don't have access there, is to have good conversations with the head coach stroke manager to be able to lead upwards as well as lead downwards. And I think actually it's a really interesting question you're posing there, because I think this is crucial for sustaining great cultures and sustaining your job as a head coach or manager. Because if you sustain your job as a head coach or manager, then you have more consistency of culture. And so subsequently, the organization itself might be more successful over the mid to long term. But I think what can happen is that if you don't have a clear idea or plan as a head coach or manager, then it's very around, let's call it psychosocial or biopsychosocial, but the psychosocial, the psychological side, the social environment, the cultural, and so on and so forth. If you don't have a real clear plan, then it's very difficult to articulate upwards. But if you have that clear plan, you can articulate it upwards. And if you can articulate it upwards, and you can give demonstrations of when you're helping your team of people, staff and players, engage in these psychosocial practices, that you're working on these people of yours from a human performance perspective, I actually think that lends itself towards those, the CEO, the CFO, and so on and so forth, and board of directors, understanding what you are trying to do, the breadth and the depth of what you're trying to do, and that it's not just, I'm not going to say that they think you're just kicking a ball around, but it's not just tech-tac, for example, and physical, but it's broader there, and that makes it more meaningful. I'm not suggesting for 1 second that suddenly everybody keeps their job, because people will always lose their job in this profession. That's just the nature of it. But maybe it bulletproofs you a little bit more if you're able to articulate that side of things upwards. So that is definitely the first answer to that. And if anybody at that boardroom wants to kind of understand, okay, here's this plan, but what does this look like at granular detail? I just think that's so important for clubs, because if the guys at the people, excuse me, at the top have a better appreciation of what that looks like, then I think that they feel more empowered to sustain that culture for a longer term, irrespective of the outcomes that the organization is experiencing.
And it feels like an opportunity as much as anything, because every company, every team will have an environment that you could describe in some way. Everyone will have a culture, whether that's good or bad. And to have a progressive performance environment and culture feels like it has to be informed by how we work, how we behave, what are the principles that guide us. So yeah, it feels like that's another real opportunity for people to explore, at least in performance environments, which I think sometimes can get a little bit too wrapped up in results, as opposed to review and reflection about process. How do we get on? What's the result? What's the outcome? What's the bottom line? Rather than actually, how do we perform, and a review of that.
Yeah, and as you're speaking there, it makes me, you've triggered my thought here into, I'll try and articulate this in the best way I can. Let's imagine that I'm brought in to an organization, and the first things I'm doing with a head coach or manager is helping them create a psychologically informed environment. A psychologically informed, a pie being that, we want to take into account the thoughts, the feelings, the experiences, and the personalities of the players in front of us, of the people in front of us. And at boardroom, they're going, well, to the head coach, well, why should I actually fund this? Come on, really? Do we need to? We need to win games. Well, now we can start explaining that pie and why that's important. Why that's important for well-being and mental health. Why that's important for decisions around coaching process within coaching practice. And then, hey, Steve, we can then maybe even link this back into HPM with our 3 fantastic words that we're working on: energy, strong, and focused. Because we're saying, well, if we've got this pie and we take a very sophisticated approach to our people challenges, we take into account the experiences, the day-to-day experiences our people have, we take into account mental health practices. This is part of our pie. And those mental health practices and the well-being processes we've got in place, and the fact that we dig a little bit deeper about the experiences of our people, that feeds into energy, strong strength, and focused. That feeds into our HPM, because we know if Johnny or Mary over there if we're not careful around the pressure that's put on them, we know historically that they experience some mental ill health. We've got to be mindful of that. But what we know is when we do that well with that person, when we negotiate the right solutions with them, which might be that they might not come in on a Tuesday for that activity there. We might go to that length. What we know is we'll get at the weekend Johnny or Mary engaging in energy, strong focus, being in their HPM, because what we know now are, biopsychosocial factors make performance a much more subtle craft than simply wham bam thank you ma'am. We're just going to go there and win. We're just going to go there and send it. Basically, it's a little bit more to it than that. So I do wonder, listening to what you were saying there, is if it affords us the opportunity to communicate the message upwards around the granularity of engagement, learning, and performance.
Love it. I thought rather than biological, psychological, sociological, I thought when you said make a more subtle performance, I thought you were going to say make the world go round. Just that's what it's all about, baby. Hey, look, it's been brilliant talking to you. Fascinating. I love the flow of thoughts that you create. It's been long overdue, and listening to you today and unpack some technical concepts, but make them tangible, but make them realistic too. It's been a real privilege to listen to you. So it's no wonder that the Sports Psych show is as popular as it is. So Dan, I just want to say thanks for coming on the podcast. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Steve. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.